something we discussed yesterday or the day before yesterday. So this idea from the point of view of like attachment, aversion, etc. When it comes down to whatever we do it eventually, or in the final kind of, when it comes down to it, we do it just for the self. So it's just me, this is me, this is my body, these are my aggregates, these are my friends, this is my possession, etc. So it all comes down to that. So here it is because the consciousness which perceives I, and therefore my body, my awareness. So it's this appearance of I, the way it appears to the consciousness, and the way in which I appears to the consciousness, it appears to be true, to be truly being that I. And so therefore, whenever something threatens this I, or that which belongs to the I protect the phenomenon. I protect whatever it is. I protect myself, my own possession. Likewise, if someone threatens my possession, threatens this I try to defend myself. So therefore, it has all to do with the sense of I or not thinking I. And so if other people that they also perceive I, well, that's not my business. It's got nothing to do with it. So there's a sense that I'm just really, I'm truly I, I'm truly this person I, and this is truly my possession. But that other people have the same sense, I don't pay any attention to it. If Genla, and again Geshe-la pointed at the Genla in front of him, the monk in front of him, if his eye were to appear to him in the same way as his own eye appeared, then he would look up to this Genla in the very same way. So, therefore, it is only to do the sense of I, of to do this and to do that. Our kind of way of acting in this world has to do of the manner of how the I appears to consciousness. And if we were to be able to put aside such consciousness, if that wasn't there wouldn't be a sense of I and others, or I and not I. So there would be no difference between my body and his body, or another person's body. So this means the sense of I actually just comes from the mind. It just comes from our own awareness, from our own mind. And if we see that as true, and it's because of seeing it as true that we have such a strong sense of I. We see this as truly being an I. But if we were to leave behind those awarenesses to which such an I appears, we wouldn't have such a strong sense.
Tiki koate zile changenji ina, an shine jamone muchigi sunyade shensena mangures. Masena michigras, shensena mangurwas. Chile mama geshevarwas, di tawone re samachi shine tendura. The tiki koate kyuni mena jamone misun rete marela matuache rete so quick killing me was same thing.
So those who have a little bit of an understanding of that idea, have a bit of a sense of a notion of that idea, then they can bring in the idea that Holiness usually, the concept that Holiness usually introduces or usually talks about, that others are many. I'm just one. So therefore others are more important because they outnumber me, and I'm just one person. Without the previous understanding, without the previous kind of notion of I is just relative or only in relation to the mind, there's really a sense of I, then we would think, yes, it's like that, but, yes, but, we keep saying, yes, it makes sense, but, so there's really not real sense that this is the truth.
Di samlo tangdang di le song ha, desi shiwa lagi labdi nang lo le song ha. Da di chi di chane, da pe di dinti jigo chi le chare, gana di le charwa ina, kazan lani nga la inba, nga siye di la, nisi ki chimbu zi goye di, nga si di nyebu cha. Ani shen si di tari mo chan di yin saris. Da di nang shin chene pe chawa ina, da di tsujo rwa, di pa jo re. Jezang, da di desi nyewa nawa shagidwa semla. Di 타링은 나와셔기도. 다 레디 아니 디 로디기 철수점에 모두 유코랑기 톤에 이링 요르베스나 요 말이스. 매바 가르스는 파조네 따딩이디나 디녀 통구래 디르가 통구래스 디르와 다 디나신 잘라다 코페 인자 답되거든 다 디르야 야 디녀래 디르가래 야 마레스니다 그게 디르가래 디녀르스 미신다 따모지 마라 파치나 야 디녀래 디르디 니링세 디르 통당 계절에마도 유코랑게 토네 디녀래 디르가래시 요미도아스 디나신 랑스디 니부지 나와샤 신스디 아니 링부지 나와샤르고래 타링부지 나와샤르고래 디르 차주스케자 차주잠레마도 미코랑게 토네 미디 링녀래 디 링아레스 이제디 미도아스 마티레
So Krishna talked about this, saying he mentions. Well, I might as well talk about this because we already spoke about it earlier on. So as Shantidewa has said in the Sita Samuchaya, in that book, he talked about why, or in this commentary, he talked about why is the eye, why do we see the eye as more important? Why does one see oneself as more important? Well, because the eye is closer to oneself, and others are further away from oneself. So that was the reasoning given in that text. But actually, if we consider this again, if we investigate it, so very close to Geshe-la, there's a notepad. So this is here, and then further away there is an MP3 player that Geshe-la pointed at. So this notepad is here, and the MP3 player is over there. So it seems that there's really over here, over there, that from its own side there appear to be these objects, but actually it's just a matter of perspective. Because from Geshe-la's perspective, the notepad is over here, and the iPad is over there. But from the perspective of a person on the other side of the table, the MP3 player, the MP3 player is here, and the notepad is over there. Likewise, Geshe-la is saying that if he switched around those two objects, he could put the MP3 player closer to him and the notepad further away from himself. In that case now, the MP3 player would be here, and the notepad would be further away. Or if he switches it back again, Geshe-la did that, so the notepad is closer again, and the MP3 player is further away now. If Geshe-la were to stand up and walk around the table, now the MP3 player would be here and the notepad would be over there. So therefore it shows it is just from the perspective of the mind. It is just by way of appearance or the way it is seen by the mind that a phenomenon is closer or further away. And in the same way, therefore we can say regarding the self, this closeness, feeling close towards the self, that is just it's just a mere appearance to the mind. Feeling far away with regard to others, that is also just from the perspective of a specific mind. None of those, close and far, etc., exist from the side of the object.
다 디제다 타니지 제지 다 타니 저간딜레 따다 리뷰에 단다 되게 도저히 제요르디 이네 쇼쇼 진기지 셰바이나 딘지기 니취디 콘도 취니 다다 신디 냠주디 배티코르 냠주디 아니 고화점다 내가 좀 이거 용어를 쓰실 용어를 배티 냠주디 타버지 타버터줘야지 아니 디칸라 냠바 마세 장레제 신기 체워기 성로디 토네 슈견의 텐조디 아니 대진도 쓰줘야지.
So he's not saying, I don't know whether the way I can phrase it is okay totally, but anyway, this needs to be analyzed. But Geshe-la is saying, when we totally understand, when there's a natural, total understanding that I and others are equal, in the continuum, from the perspective of such a person, they have attained. If one has that sense in one's own mind, one has attained liberation. If of the two, self and others are really seen as more important, are seen as more valuable, if one really has that sense, then one attains enlightenment, one has attained enlightenment.
The Tuling Laway, Tuling Kivu the Rigmare, Tutuji Lavaina, and it did Lana, and any two Tajuma, the Ranji Tajuma Tizuki, and a Shin Ninji Kigros, Tada Nyama Chasara, Lager Kigirosana, Kigri, Manchuli. 개규기라가 끼기를 된 다 이나 아니 전시 선반 나시마차야 가르에서는 신기들도 검지대요 말아 신체를 생각을 치료니는 공지돼요 말로 디 마차버려 뭐도 신원술에 인지 채워 지기를 선택도 때 이내 다다 이제 하시는 걸라 아니 이랑이 남도 주요에는 대전도 죽하고 싶으시 쓴거 나 죽하고 인당디 아니 장등이 선도 축체다니 인베 소저 그저 호텔갈 때 고고데 들으라다 아이 등이다 안티 칼레스인데 니 열도시 그저 뭐 쉬어지로요
So then, with respect to having said this, so therefore, in short, well, hearers and solitary realizers, so the discussion that comes forth from this, therefore, in short, hearers and solitary realizers who see self and others as equal, well, they have great compassion, therefore, so they must have incredible compassion for others because they see oneself and others as equal. But why do they not have, so their compassion is much greater than our own personal compassion, but why do they not have the compassion of the Bodhisattva? Why does their compassion is not the same as the compassion of the Bodhisattva? And the answer that's usually given is that they're not so familiarized, they haven't familiarized themselves to the same degree as a Bodhisattva has with working for the benefit of others. So, therefore, this is also given as a reason when talking about why when one has entered a hira or solitary realizer path, one has entered such a path, at some point one is not able to go, before one has attained one's goal of self-liberation, one is not able to enter the Bodhisattva path. And the answer that some people give is because they have worked for their own benefit for so long, they're so familiar with working for one's own benefit that they cannot do this. But Geshe-la is saying, I'm not sure really that is the reason.
That is the sanini peji di that tao consulti charuo consulti kan teacher teacher di jishi ki da pagi jiyong ki da ni samji di lao sa wa da re komdang di lao sa wa da re teacher di da di doji ji di ngo to le na che sha na da lo ye ding lo lo ba ba chi to ini pagi tigo ti ni ji di ma sa go du ku mo ba che logi le ya penatina lo la tigo ta sha yu de le ya ho shi du sa ba yu na ya le ko tu je ro ta pagi ya tina la le je sha ju tina lo la ti le ya tigo ta e ti ko ra na la ta yu de ti ini tigo ya shin ta tina me ba ti ta yu na ti de la na ti ti ki mi du sa ba ta ti yu na ka du ti la ve che du sto le chi to na ti ni.
So then, this kind of having completed this part of the text, so tomorrow we look at how to meditate on the view. So we have like a short kind of explanation of this, so in general an explanation, so how to meditate on this, on emptiness, how to meditate on emptiness, on the view of emptiness. And then I will of course read a little bit here, but you should also ask questions. You should directly ask if there's any kind of question you have with regard of any of the topics here. And likewise, there are some questions asked in the text, and the answers are also provided in the text, but you may disagree with the answers given, with the responses given in the text, and you should directly put forth your doubt, you should put forth your disagreement, you should present it in the form of a discussion. So therefore tomorrow, the way we go about it is by way of that kind of discussion, discussing back and forth.
디간다 파게 단다 가장 이 디바라를 빠르게 해야 해. 내가 빠르마 자르 지스라이 걔라. 그래서 먼저 인터넷이 디간다 파유고 해요. 지금 비자고 연구로. 지금 걔나 같이 데스딜라 디치르지. 인기시 양원주 때는 뒤지 당마당이 뒤에나 아니 아샤를 손에 뒤도. 뒤지 당마당이 뒤지 좀 사대에나. 아샤를 디티르 디지 지나야 부도세도 근데 선지 리버제 롱레 로
Gisela said previously that they should only photocopy certain parts of this text, not everything. Why? Because things may be added, something may be later on, may be added to this. So anyway, with regard to now, if there's anything new you can come up with within that, what the teachers here, for example, if there's no time to discuss, to have kind of suggestions about adding things, etc. If there's no time to do it here in class, it can also be done in Lena's room. It can be done discussing it with them, like whatever needs to be added, what kind of reasons, what kind of quotations are important here in terms of discussing this text, in terms of how this is taught.
但是呢，你的 TV 高了，毕竟我们老土有嘛，这是国内的地区，国内的地了，安尼其实他地了呢，地角落了，他什么当时地地用过些的，是呢，这什么当时，地个，然地嘛，因为今年搞个原因呢，安尼其实地用过些的是呢，但这了都是这些个了，其实地那了，可以。 수수이 있으면 코와다 신다기 땅마다 딘디다 딜러지고 딘디 땅은 유지 딘디 쪽으로 세야 딘디요나 손은
So when I wrote this text, I didn't have the opportunity to look vastly at the scripture. So when I put this text together, it was kind of a rough kind of way of looking at things. So there was a reasoning I saw, and then what is behind that, I kind of presented these different kinds of reasons. But if there's another person, if there's someone else who has like new ideas, new kind of reasons, new kinds of arguments, then it's very helpful because just a rough kind of presentation helps me to go deeper and kind of go further into the subject matter. So therefore, any suggestions are welcome, anything that, any input from your side.
Tene kansa tade jeni karini gires kazangi mangozu ta diwotli cheyore dina lola 자외지가 있나 대수 숙체와 잡으디 남신 얘기를 했어야 잡아다 제니로 초반 얘기를 했어야 잡아 근데 요거 있는 다는 것은 디오틀이 뭐 중요한 거래 초반 얘기를 했으니 표지 중만서 남신을 했으레스 중을 봐 지선 남신이다 초반 더 승주 유나 이 많이 삼아 잡던데 유나 안티 컬러 다 달라고 저는 제도네 하고도 김선자고 그렇지 안테 스팅서로 줘야라 기회에 물어봐. 지난해 먼저 타지 왜 개요 말아. 타지 두개 말이 주제진이 지나라. 그러봐. 남신 다 인생인데서 우마라 유로도서 개버치거든 이 순거라. 대지도 그 못이 가져야지로도 직 얘기를 다 공부지 잡지. 근데 참 가서 참들라. 다 디가는 섬다해라 왔다. 이님은 같이 나와 같이 내라시기리 같이 로하시질 내라시기리 뭐 대지니 테스팅서로 줘야 편도 물어봐. 디마 인이 연애들이 다 같이 저거도 인지미지야 저거도 너희 굉장히 인과예요 말을 신다 연애 되게 디다를 선물하고 되게 굉장히 연애
So also in the past we've been engaging in analysis or discussions on searching for the person. So what is found? What do we find in the search for the person? In other words, what is the person? So many of you seem to have, or many in general, many people have this view that the self is either the consciousness, the mental consciousness, or the collection of the aggregates. So therefore here, well, the collection of the aggregates, there were not that many here in particular. Most people opted for the mental consciousness, or those who voiced their opinion, they talked about the mental consciousness being the person. So this is helpful to investigate that, so to bring forth your reasons. What are your reasons for thinking, for example, that the collection of the aggregates is the person? It is helpful, it is useful to go through these reasons. Of course, we don't have to come to any kind of decision here during this time, during this class. Moreover, it's difficult in those 2 hours to actually come to some kind of decision. If we think about the followers of the Svatantrika who figured out their view over such a long period of time, it's difficult to come to some kind of decisive conclusion about this matter. But anyway, it is helpful to think about it here. And some people, by engaging in this kind of analysis, not here but also on a private kind of level, after some months, may come to some kind of understanding. Others it may take a little longer, it may take some years. But eventually, one will get some understanding of what is the self, etc. And if you do not agree, I mean, you may not think that the collection of the aggregates is the person, or that the mental consciousness is the person, but something other than those. Anyway, whatever is your assertion, you're welcome to bring it forth, to present your reasons with regard to what is the person, how does the person exist. So myself, initially I had a very strong sense that the self existed separate from the consciousness. So initially I had that very strong sense that I was kind of went in that direction and wanted to really find it. So that was, at that time it was quite strong. Anyone who have any opinion, anything to share, any suggestion with regard to how the self exists? So again to this question is here from the point of view of like the rope appearing as a snake. Well, the snake that appears, the way it appears is like, well, actually the basis is the rope. On the basis of the rope which appears, therefore there's also the appearance, the mind of a snake. But on top of that, there's also a type of a sense of a separate kind of snake. So there's a separate kind of, so it's based on the rope, but then there's a snake that appears. Here, likewise, with regard to the concept of consciousness, or the consciousness, for example, so based on the consciousness, then there's an I, and again there's a kind of a separate, even though it is based on the basis, it is based on the rope in the case of the snake, or it is based on the concept on the consciousness, nonetheless there's a sense of a separateness. So basically, therefore, actually we actually think the rope is the snake. So actually, directly, the rope is the snake. Shouldn't we therefore also think directly that the consciousness is the person? So if we take the example, so Gentile basically what he's saying is, if we say the rope is the snake, we perceive the rope as the snake. Shouldn't we also perceive the concept, the consciousness as the person?
The DJ do any Taja dream in Zang, Taja the Julian body, and called Loshe Shashan and Tigido. Da and Pumbo Dama is, and Pumbola Maonyam Lana, and Loshe Chadron, and I have a chador. Pumbola Maonyam. And Pumanga Mahila, not that Loshi Chadro.
So this would be in the case, so if it is like, okay, so we perceive the rope as a snake, if it is just perceiving the rope as a snake, well the rope is not a snake, and perceiving the rope as the snake, that would be a wrong consciousness. So likewise, perceiving the aggregate as the person, but the person is not the aggregate, sorry, perceiving the aggregate as the person, but the aggregates are not the person, then it would just merely be a wrong consciousness, perceiving the aggregates which are not a person to be a person.
但第了阿零个了，我娘当的给这些为呢，安尼，学堂进的这些为呢，不但大好长辈讲呢，父母了我娘不把这事，安尼第几对在呢，安尼爸爸开始给第几有事嘞，不但大好长辈闹了这事，安尼，我娘嘛，老些人那边的，阿啥，我娘呢，可我嘛人那边的，这个多是，更给明多是，他平时的我他呢都有个嘛，相应都是来你了。 先可的老大们多，但我们是的老我们的见面多，但的确像这些的，就是但父母了我娘把这边是，老百姓呢，但谈久了，父母了我娘把这边，但今年的这当生活是吧？但谈久开零的所以呢，父母了我娘把人呢老是差不多，俺父母了大声的要的，谁他就要的，谈久凶难了的，反正就比较嘛一毛钱。 我是父母的大把意思，但根本的这个熊呢，你父母的大些的，但他就熊呢的天的，父母的点的大把的出大来我来成就，因为吃的出对呢，俺父母的大是吃对不了嘛到，俺对他的父母的点的大，那么到父母的大是看对了呢，这个嘛是常常的送过的，满足的的过的，经过来加上他进的送一面还不嘛说，的过是。
So here, when we think I, how do we actually think I? So according to Chandrakirti, it is actually not that we think that the aggregates, with regard to the aggregates, we think I. So this is not what Chandrakirti is saying, but anyhow, if we say we think I with regard to the aggregates, so with regard to the aggregates, it's very difficult to express the same in English, it doesn't work in English in the same way as the Tibetan, but it basically means on the aggregates, or as to the aggregates, we see I, we perceive I, or on the aggregates, we impute I. According to Peshikin Bhaminjawa, that is actually not correct. When we say on the aggregates, or with regard to the aggregates, we impute I, what it really means, this is like a short form, this is the abbreviated form saying on the aggregates, or with regard to the aggregates. That is merely the abbreviated form of saying the self is imputed independence on the aggregates. So independence on the aggregates, imputing on the aggregates. So if you leave away the word dependence, independence, then you have the short version. So Vishal is saying, I'm not sure this is really Gendanjawa's final opinion, but this is what Gendan seems to be saying.
这些话呢，在有些课的老师里面有提到，提过这几种说法。
实际上，他的接入去送上来用的个都，让他错过对了大把的些找不到，但是店里些给这里没有套呢。但第几的，电力气泡里面都上不到，他这的有不起，他这眼睛里有不起，是吧？他这眼睛里有的，但眼睛的他这有通过是吧？ 다 코랑 타는 거 요인상 세고 마타는 대주도스 라용디 코랑기 로기 아자 주제 삼바 되지 돼요 말이스 닝에기 따디 타자래 되어 딜라 타자 딜라 크기 주제 라기도 크기 주제 납사디 타자디 것도 요 말이 신다 가야 요 말이 그래서 닝에기 따디 타자라 주제 라기도 코랑기 타자 주제 된지 요 말이 제산다 얘기 따다나 신친 시비지 전에 전화 풍부를 나오냐 말이 그러 다 코랑기 로 생기랑기 아니 로 코랑기 계제 쉐바이나 아니 풍부 나오 배치 요 말이 풍부를 나오냐 뭐 많이시나 풍부를 나오냐 뭐 냠거 베나 아니 베나 남셰이나 아니 가시고래 마켓에 친구 차그래 시디 남시디 기타 친구 차그래 큐니민도 마켓에 친구 차그래 세 가디나 놀라 남시 매버도 오는데 남시 기타 친구 차그래 세 술지에 매버 서비스도 마 민정이 뭐스여서 이 남시디 민정이 뭐스여서 딘디민도 지금 마디나 놀라 딘디 마시에기 섬로디 나로라 남시 레메고 서비스 두스잖아 다 남시 이나다 초바 이네 지바래 다 파게 딜러 마우스 랑에디 파게 주구주가 전에 풍부디 마다 요마로 지금 딘디기 통지잖아 그 마답사디 주구주가 전에 풍부디레스 남디잖아 나당 딘디진 따나 아는 마 풍부디라 마 냐마다고 남시디라 마 냐마다고 초바디 지바래 다 초바디라 마 냐마다고 지디 테스 체버체니 니 나고면서 그러지.
So Geshe was saying that actually when I impute something on the basis of its part or the collection of the parts. So for example, let's say in front of me I have a rope. I have a multicolored rope. So I see it as a rope. I don't see it as a snake. For the person far away, they do not perceive it as a multicolored rope. They perceive it as a snake. So I'm just saying that. I'm actually just saying, oh, he perceives this multicolored rope as a snake. If you're not saying, I don't think that's really what he does, that he just sees the rope as a snake. It's not that process of just imputing snake on a rope. So likewise, with regard to the aggregates, it's also not like that. That we just perceive the aggregates as being the self. Why is that not? So it's not that we think on, like, just seeing, looking at the aggregates and think, that doesn't happen. Why? Because, for example, when I say I get famous, when I have a feeling I am famous, I got famous, there's not in no way a sense that my consciousness is becoming famous. So therefore, since there's no sense that since we don't think when I have thought I am famous, since there's no thought that the consciousness is famous, that shows that when we perceive I on the aggregates, it's actually not perceiving the aggregates themselves as being I. Because if we were to do that, we would perceive the mental consciousness to be the I, and therefore there would be a sense, my consciousness is famous, when there's a thought, I'm famous. Or likewise, when I get that reputation, when one gets that reputation, there's no sense that my consciousness gets that reputation. So, thus there is like, there's saying, therefore, there's really not the sense that the aggregates are the actual self. It is rather that there's something separate. So, for example, but where does that come from? That sense that I actually impute the aggregates as being the self. Where does that come from? Well, when we point at something, if I want to point at something as the self, if I were like, where's the self? The only thing I can point at is the aggregates, is the collection of the aggregates. That's what I'm pointing at. That is what I'm seeing here. So therefore, there's a sense of the consciousness or the collection of the aggregates, that is the I. So, but actually, that is only because of the only thing we can identify as that to which we can point at when we want to point at it. So it's not that they're really identical, there's something separate.
那所以呢，当我们讲说，哦，他说我，他在说我，然后他在说我的这个我们要指的就只有它的韵体而已，就指的只有韵的聚合而已。那可是这个是我们去观看别人在说我的指陈处有什么的时候，能指的就只有韵体而已。可是当我们自己想着我是什么的时候，当我们的内心里面的时候，在想的时候，我们其实根本没有把韵体想成是我。所以老师觉得这两种不同的看法应该要做一个区分才对。
但第几的在呢，其实경쟁第차네 로케단 딘디지기 차네 다인다나 초바 다르베스나 가슬라서. 그 디시송진 덴도로 데스파 초바 다르베.
So if you were to say that it is that one just imputes it on the aggregates as in like they are the aggregates of the I, then would you say that the collection of the aggregates is the I?
딜레디 겐아니 쳐다가가 예버더도 니 타드기 취비 풍기 초바디 쳐다가 왔다. 타르타르 주리스 차고라 디나신 풍부 초바딜 마슬레지 말나와디 차고라 대개나 타르타기 최디 남셰디지 남셰디라 다스 나 레비 로hingi 라브로 근데 거리고로 디레비오 차기도 저도 가가도 괜찮은데 알겠네.
So actually, Geshe-la is saying that Yanchikdom in himself has a slightly different view, where Geshe-la himself says that the multicolored robe is equivalent to, is equal to the collection of the aggregates. So the multicolored robe is like the collection of the aggregates on the basis of which one then thinks snake. Whereas Gentrukdo, he sees the example as slightly differently. The multicolored robe is like the consciousness which is the basis for saying I. And there's an innate, therefore, an innate sense of I.
디나 신치기 단다 암소다 가르스는 남시에도 뜻이 심바침보여. 시바시는 춘준간의 직장요래. 대자마세 아니 시바교와 제만조 시바교와 아마는 용 시바여기 조제 타버터 상기 디건 타니 시비 장요라. 다 디지디 단다 리치기 다 유메다 테스트 중인지리데 칸드리아 시바키멜링이 되는도 레버마도 요마레 무수그라 텐딩이 되는도 루군다기 돈. 다 딘지 제디기 나 레디 시샤서디 시바샤기 요나 먼저도 집을 찾기 위해나 상당히도 먼저 있는 남상 시바지 쥐되기도 뒤나로는 시바디 맨날 로드 집으로 왔다 로드 미두래 말았다 그치 하드가 일단은 미 통해도 수고 모두 통과요 말데 아니 수고디도 로 통해 수고 집을 통과하러 왔다 이는 로 통도 코두랍니다 겐두스랍니다 심보 통도 겐두라디 뒤나로는 시바디 집 무슨 매네 슈 지도지 치딩이 됐다. 이내 단다디 시험치는 키만능이 믿으지 로hingi 처술다. 먼저는 신 용기 외나. 먼저는 남배 주대기 신이 텐. 철교이나 저에 그런 만난수 신지 참여기 로hingi다. 디철교 외나. 뒤에 때 심주제도.
So when we talk about likewise for us as I guess for us in particular as Buddhists, as Buddhists, so there's a very strong innate sense of consciousness. So the consciousness comes from previous life. The consciousness goes to a next life. So consciousness gets transformed when one enhances those consciousness. The consciousness becomes liberated. The consciousness becomes enlightened, etc. But how about those who do not assert the existence of consciousness, who have this intellectually or ideologically acquired view that there's only the brain, that's what makes us. So I wonder whether their basis of invitation, do they also have that view that the brain is the I? Like in the same way as there may be the view that the consciousness is the I, so is there also that view in the continuum of those people that the brain is the I? So actually, for us it's a bit like, well, there's a difference between a consciousness-less body and a body that has a consciousness, because a body without a consciousness would just be a corpse. But when we see, what we see is only the body. When we see another person, we see only the body, but we know it's not a corpse. We kind of assume behind it there's a consciousness. There must be something there, because if there was no consciousness, then we could look at a person. So how about those people who do not accept the existence of consciousness? Do they have that same sense? There must be something there, and then just because there's a functioning brain, therefore, they have that sense there's something there. But isn't that something that we innately, all of us have? That there's something in that person, a kind of an awareness, some conscious entity there. Isn't there a sense that we all have innately when we look at another person?
就从这个观点来说，老师说他觉得我们应该考虑一下，我们会不会有可能是受到宗义的影响，或受到我们是佛教徒受到宗义的影响，而以为我们的具身心上其实是把心事当成佛。
今年心等心当大当的时候，那可能给阿妈通用的、不通用的，属于讲嘛一个新鲜的速度来来嘛来呢，这话给传统去用的一个话的。等你嘛一个小话都是通的，我是通完的心给得给罗当心情起不起完的心。 통가이 사회지를 삼아봐도 그걸 철수를 하 그래서 개월도 샤워로 통하다 샤워 통화를 개월도 되기라면 하신 in the taxi to the Tayundi, Sayaji to Samamato, Chick Shower, the shower for Chigai. Tisum Tayado, you'll think it.
So, for example, like when you take, for example, tigers or leopards, you know, like when they look at a deer, do they see, is there a difference for them a live deer and the corpse of a deer? I mean, don't they just think meat in any case? Whereas for us, when we see a deer or corpse of a deer, there's a difference. We differentiate between those two. As in, this is a deer that is alive, or this is a dead deer. I was wondering, is it the same for tigers or leopards? Is there not a sense there's no difference between a deer that is alive or a deer that is dead? In both cases, it's food.
这是食物，这样它不会有尸体跟活体的分别，所以在他的心里面，他也其实也没有心事这样子一个差异，所以老师说这个角度也是一个值得思考的事情。
第几的他经济他他另外的第七呢他搞老他的另外他的星期呢，아니 남시디 다레스 이미 좀 젠디 아니 마 레로신지디 차용도 시샤세디 타적이 최디 남시디 레도스 다딜티거드
So taking it the way when Kipton explains it. So is there any views of this that doesn't have to be the only one talking? So here, taking the view that Kipton presented that here the rope is just like the consciousness. So as we perceive the rope to be the snake, so here likewise the consciousness is perceived as being the self. So is there any, do you have any view on this, any suggestion, any question on that? Is that Geshe-la's not clear? If you think, if you don't agree with that, if you disagree with that, please say so.
Sorry, I don't know very much about Buddhism, so I just little learning. So now I'm totally lost. So I go to classes, the library classes, so we learn that we have to generate compassion, kindness, and we have to get rid of the ignorance and everything. So since I'm coming these classes, I'm just wondering who's waking up in the morning and who has to get rid of all this ignorance, and where is this ignorance and where is the I? So if Geshe-la can say something about it, because I'm really thinking who's doing all these things, and where is the I who has to generate compassion, or where is the I that I have to get rid of for self? He said that we have to get rid of the self to get over the suffering. So
okay. So you don't have any response, direct response to what
I'm
just said?
Yeah, I'm just having like...
Şimdi kapı sonuçta çoğaran çalmar. Yine tadamos çıksına di karsına. Ani nançu ya bu şingme. Ta nançu canı ta ci dawa kaşı ci götürü ta ci benzo kana donde sagi zinda na do. Ani zinda dinana gege karşımırısına. Ta nançu ninje kongore. Ani semba sambo ki gore. Nançu mari pa pongore sra. Yine yan tanda gişimdagi sundala dena. Sani shoga ya lange di sures. Shoga ya ni segi di sures. Ani chi kare mare pa pongo ngi kares. Ani chi kala uru poni kasada tana ninje gomda chi champa gomda zo sures. Tachi 뭐 시험하잖아. 얘만 이나 찍찍 적으로 니가 뭐야? 시험 오겠니? 제가 뭐 이나 아차서. 저기 못 찍는다서. 이게 진짜 디콜라 섹세션.
제가 듣는 줄.
I suggest you go look for it.
미세다 세지제 개요말에 가슴이만 시에다가라래. 다간지 장은 거는 요말에 젠 얘기 말에 시도 뒤된다디 매비 되마 임바. 다디 알레 람상마 용네 디셈의 샤고에 디게 치므로 매시비 기제 마임바. 마임바 마세 장은 거는 매나 단도 유 세디 땡제 이놈샤 따다 야부샤 동민치
So people are saying, well, he can't really add much to what is already explained. So basically, you should look for the I. You should search for the I. What is the I? How does it exist? It's not saying that there is no I. Of course, there is an I that does exist. In fact, the mere fact that there is no I that can be found,